conspiracy theories. Everybody knows about them. They're nothing new. They've been around for centuries, centuries and centuries. There's even um, conspir- conspiracy theories surrounding the death of Tutankhamun. Outside of the fact that he was a product of a shitload of incest. But there are people who claim that he was murdered. So that, and there might be some to that, but anyways. But one that I was actually reminded about a couple nights ago was one involving Titanic. Shocking, I know. Me interested in something about Titanic and already knowing about it, and now I'm sitting here doing a TikTok about it. Oh my god. The horror. But it's called the Titanic switch theory. And basically what it is, and it's something that's been debunked time and time and time again, but because this one guy decided he wanted to actually sell books, people believe it. But basically the theory is that after Olympic had a collision with a Royal Navy vessel off the island of Wight that ended up damaging the hull and needed to go back up to Harlan and Wolff for extensive repairs on that damage. The theory is that White Star Line cooked up basically an insurance fraud scheme, that they would basically put Titanic into service as Olympic and put Olympic back into service but as Titanic, and then sink it on the maiden voyage for Titanic. Which on so many levels, this is wrong. So many, because there are so many, and these are things I don't think anybody really takes into consideration when they decide, oh, hey, I want to believe this. Because one, White Star Line was already starting to have money troubles, which is why, understandably, this guy started coming up with this theory to begin with. But what he doesn't figure is that it would have cost a lot more money to pull it off than they would have gotten. Because Titanic was not fully insured. It was not insured for its full value. They would have had to have paid everybody off. They would have had to pay hundreds, maybe even thousands of people off to keep this a secret. And that's just the financial side of it. Because keeping out the fact that they would have had to pay off a lot of people, White Star Line lost a lot of money with the Titanic sinking, because there was a lot of litigation. They were already under a lot of litigation at the time of the sinking because of the Olympic collision. Because there were inquiries and lawsuits and stuff trying to place the blame on who was at fault for that. Obviously, the government didn't want to blame the Royal Navy, so they were trying to pin all the blame on the civilian pilot who was helping them navigate the Isle of Wight. And White Star Line was pouring a lot of money into basically saying, no, this guy is not at fault. So yeah, White Star Line did not have the money to be paying people off to cover something as big and fraudulent as this. Because you got to figure, if you look at pictures of Titanic and Olympic side by side at Harlan and Wolff, they're huge. You can see them from pretty far away. So you've got to figure, you've got the people who work for Harlan and Wolff, you've got people who work for White Star Line, you've got people who work for vendors, you've got people who live and work around White Star Line and not White Star Line, Harlan and Wolff in Belfast. And then you got to figure all of these people's families too, because obviously your husband comes home from work with a shitload of extra money. you're going to have questions. And if you have questions, your husband's employer obviously is going to want to keep you quiet as well. So more money is going to have to be put into this. But at the same time, too, then you've got to figure Olympic was only laid up for 3 months following that collision to repair the damage. It would have taken a lot of work to take a lot of the design changes between Olympic and Titanic to switch them between the ships, to make those changes between the ships. Also, Titanic was bigger than Olympic. So you got all these people, you got all these resources, you got all these financial burdens that they already had. They wouldn't have been able to afford this. And then there's the fact that somebody who bought White Star Line in the 20s tried to defraud the British government using White Star Line. So don't you think that in the course of the British government investigating this guy and White Star Line that they wouldn't have uncovered something fishy about the Olympic class starships? Fuck me. This isn't Star Trek. I'm a fucking nerd. The Olympic class ships. Because this theory doesn't just stop with Titanic and Olympic. There are also those who take it as far as to say that Titanic and Britannic were switched. Because Britannic had not even been really started when Titanic sank. And there were a lot of design changes made to Britannic in the wake of the Titanic sinking. And so basically, this theory basically says that it's not Titanic on the bottom of the Atlantic, it's Olympic. And it's not Britannic that's at the bottom of the Mediterranean after hitting a German sea mine in 1916. It's Titanic. And that Britannic, and that Britannic was the one that was actually scrapped in the 30s and not Olympic. Which is honestly all just absolutely preposterous if you look at it. But there is just such a long list of reasons why this is just absolutely impossible. And then you have the fact that there is no way that people would have been able to keep this a secret. There were too many moving parts. And the fact that it's not really been something that was even considered until this guy wrote this book. It kind of puts more doubt into the story. And then, you look at and this guy even tried using video from expeditions down to the ship to try to prove his point, which has all easily been debunked by multiple Titanic experts, including one of my favorite. I will probably mention him every time I say anything about Titanic, Mike Brady with Ocean Liner Designs. He actually has mentioned this in at least one of his videos, that this is just, it's impossible. It never happened. So I don't know, I guess maybe my point, other than to ramble about stupid conspiracy theories involving a very famous shipwreck, is basically a lot of conspiracy theories do have merit. A lot of them do. 9/11, the Kennedys, things like that. But sometimes you really do just gotta look at them with a little bit of skepticism, because sometimes it's just somebody looking for attention, somebody looking to make money, someone looking to sell books, sell movies, whatever. So in this case, it actually is Titanic on the bottom of the North Atlantic. It actually is Britannic on the bottom of the Mediterranean, and Olympic actually was scrapped in the 1930s. So it really is one of those just think.